Today, I'd like to discuss the possibility of the manifestations all being in Eleanor's head. While I can see that being a possibility, especially in the past chapters that we've seen regarding her as being kind of a fantastical thinker, caught up in this reality that she has in her own head that she projects into real world situations. Right now, currently, that would be them being in Hill House. I think we can go even further than that and say that the manifestations aren't all in her head, as evidenced by the doctor having an experience that he hasn't told them more about yet. And outside of that, I think she is actually comfortable because now she's in a place where the reality is kind of meeting the same fantastical vision she would have in her head in other places. She almost feels at home. I think one of the strongest arguments we can say that the manifestations might be in her head is actually when they go to the library tower. Everyone else is able to go into the tower and interact with it, explore it, has no issue. However, Eleanor is not able to bring herself to go inside because it's almost as if something, some kind of internal event, some kind of dialogue is stopping her from exploring that. Inside the chapter, it says, "My mother," she said, not knowing what she wanted to tell them, and pressed herself against the wall. Almost as if she's responding to a hallucination or some kind of memory of her mother that is telling her she's not allowed to go in there, something's stopping her, some kind of oppressive force that's only in her mind. And I think that supports the argument that maybe these manifestations are a part of her projections. However, diving further into the claim where I think she's more comfortable than anything else, inside the novel on page 98, my page 98, it says, "Odd," she thought, sleepily, "that the house should be so dreadful, and yet, in many respects, so physically comfortable. The soft bed, the pleasant lawn, the good fire, the cooking of Mrs. Dudley." I think she feels at home. Outside of her saying very plainly that she feels comfortable, I think it's because finally these fantastical realities that she always holds in these stories that she makes, these narratives as she's driving along the road or sitting at a cafe, finally this house is the fantastical thing. Finally, she doesn't have to imagine it and escape to it. Finally, it's all around her, and she can just sleep for once at night, knowing that she's not the crazy one. Finally, she has a world to inhabit that matches her level of anxiety, and I think that's almost freeing for her. So I think it's more of a symbiotic relationship than it is a manifestation, but we'll see how it evolves. I think Shirley Jackson wrote into the story of Hill House the concept of a certain era of decay about the house in two very specific ways. One being the practical and almost intentional creation of the house into being a uncomfortable and sinister environment. And then the second being one that is just inherently wrong from birth, I guess you would say, of the house, of any kind of moral stability. And we see that first example when they are touring the house along with the doctor. And he goes on to explain the actual construction of the house being purposeful in its intent to be sort of off-putting and jarring. So one of those examples would be angles, which you assume are the right angles you're accustomed to and have every right to expect are true, are actually a fraction of a degree off in one direction or another. I'm sure, for instance, that you believe that the stairs you're sitting on are level because you're not prepared for the stairs which are not level. Here we get to see an example of the doctor talking about the actual construction, and when Crane was going through, having almost an obsession with the fact that people had all these right angles and symmetry in their lives, wanting to build something made of concentric circles, something that had angles that were slightly off, with stairs being unleveled, something to make you stay keen on your feet and aware that you're not supposed to be comfortable, that you're always supposed to be on edge. And for that reason, the house has this air of disdain because you don't want to be there. It's not meant for you to want to be there. And every moment that you're there, you always feel like there's something uninviting and a little bit off. And that is by design. Going into the discussion of if there's just something morally wrong with the house, the doctor also brings this up in his introduction back in page of 74. Jackson kind of breeds this into his sort of inner narrative by saying, "I need not remind you that the concept of certain houses as unclean or forbidden, perhaps sacred, is as old as the mind of man. Certainly, there are spots which inevitably attach to themselves an atmosphere of holiness and goodness. It might not then be too fanciful to say that some houses are born bad. Here we get to see a little example of the fact that maybe this just raised from some sort of sacred curse. The ground, the soil, the very intent that was put into the house has a sort of malevolence to it, which scars it, which makes it unclean, which makes it the opposite of holy, as compared to a church, which might have some sort of air of sacrament. This has that air of disdain again from its very inception, from the house's very internal feelings. It becomes an evil force that almost has a life of its own. Thank you. Bye.